My daughter-in-law taunted me, "Give me your damn house or get lost." She didn't expect what I let them believe. I spent the morning arranging the ornaments the way my husband and I used to, hanging each piece carefully, even though my hands are not as steady as they once were. I kept telling myself that Christmas still meant something, that my family would walk through that door tonight and remember that love comes before everything else. I clung to that hope like an old woman clings to the last quilt she stitched with her own hands. But the moment Becky stepped into my house that evening, the home she had lived in for years, as if it already belonged to her, I felt the air change. She glanced at the garland on the railing, at the plates I set out, and let out a sharp laugh. "This looks like a retirement home thrift store," she said loudly enough for the guests to hear. She had lived under my roof for years, but every December she acted like a stranger, stepping into a house she had already decided she deserved more than I did. Old house, old woman, old junk. Everything matches. I told myself to ignore it. Christmas Eve was not the night to spark conflict. I wanted peace. I wanted one evening where I could pretend we were still a family. I should have known better. As the room filled with neighbors and church friends, Becky moved like she owned the place, pushing past me to adjust decorations I had already set, criticizing everything in her path. She even tossed aside the gift I had wrapped for her, saying, "I hope you did not use that cheap perfume paper again. It stinks up the whole room." After an hour of enduring her comments, I realized the hostility was not a mood, it was a mission, and she was just getting started. When everyone gathered in the living room to pray before dinner, Becky suddenly stepped forward as if she had something sacred to share. Instead, she lifted her wine glass high and shouted, "Since we are all here for Christmas, why do we not talk about the best possible Christmas gift?" People looked at her, puzzled, waiting for a joke, a toast, anything resembling goodwill. Instead, she pointed straight at me. "The best gift this old woman can give us is her damn house. Either she hands it over tonight, or she gets the hell out of here and stops leeching off her son." The room erupted into shocked murmurs. A woman dropped her cookie. Someone turned off the music. I heard my own heartbeat louder than the chatter. My cheeks burned, not from shame but from disbelief that she could be this cruel on a night meant for warmth. I took a slow breath, trying to steady my voice. "Becky," I said softly, "today is a day for family. Please do not speak like this. Not tonight." She smirked, stepped closer, and spat deliberately onto my hardwood floor. "Family?" she sneered. "We are the family. You are not. Understand?" She jabbed a finger into my shoulder, pushing me back toward the tree. "So hand over the paperwork and get out. This house is wasted on you." Before I could respond, Andrew finally moved, but not to defend me. He looked at me the way a man looks at a stranger he wishes would walk away. His silence was louder than Becky's shouting. And in that silence, I felt the sharpest cut of all. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. You think Christmas makes you special? She hissed. You think you belong here? You have been clinging to this place for far too long. It is our turn, our home, our life, not yours. I looked around the room. Some guests avoided my eyes. Others stared at me with pity, the kind that hurts more than mockery. No one stepped forward, not even Andrew. Becky shoved me sharply, my back hitting the lower branches of the tree. A single ornament slipped off and cracked against the hardwood, its sharp sound cutting through the silence. I could feel needles prick my arm as Becky leaned in close enough that I could smell her wine. She pulled back and spoke louder so everyone could hear. "Sign the deed over to us, Marjorie. It is time to stop pretending you matter." I had been humiliated before, but never like this. Never in front of friends. Never during Christmas. Never by the woman I once tried so hard to welcome into my family. I straightened my back, though my legs trembled. "I am still Andrew's mother," I said quietly. Becky let out a barking laugh. "Not anymore," She looked at Andrew over her shoulder. "Tell her." Andrew's voice was barely above a whisper when he said, "Maybe it is time you thought about letting go, Mom." It wasn't the first careless sentence he had thrown at me. Years earlier, in one of their arguments, he had said something similar to Becky, never knowing she would twist it into a lifetime of resentment toward me. Letting go. The words hit harder than the shove. I looked at my son, the boy I once held through fevers and nightmares, and realized he no longer saw me as his mother, only as an obstacle. I did not cry. I felt the tears gather, but I held them back. Crying would have given Becky exactly what she wanted. Instead, I let my gaze travel across the room, taking in every witness to my humiliation. I wanted to remember this moment not for revenge but for clarity. For the first time in years, I saw the truth clearly. I whispered the only words I could find. "I understand." Becky rolled her eyes. "Good, then hand over the deed." But she did not understand the meaning behind my words. I was not surrendering. I was awakened. That moment, beneath the lights of the tree I decorated alone, I finally knew. I would not be silent anymore. I would let the truth speak for the first time in my life. That was the night the tide began to turn, though Becky did not feel it yet, but she would. Soon. People love to say that the holidays bring families closer, but that Christmas was the year I learned they can also expose every crack you have tried to patch for decades. While I spent my morning tying ribbons on gift boxes, basting Andrew's favorite roast, and lighting the cinnamon candle that reminded him of his childhood, Becky was perfecting something else entirely, a plan to take the house I had built my entire life around. It started with her obsession for a rental cabin up in the Smoky Mountains, a place she called our ticket to a better life. She showed Andrew photos on her phone. Snowy balconies, stone fireplaces, hot tubs steaming under the winter moon. The loan officer had told them they needed collateral, real collateral. Andrew had nothing. Becky had nothing. Only I did. My home. The home they treated like a parasite lived in it. The home Becky liked to call that pathetic old bunker your mother refuses to die in. At first, I knew none of this, but the ugliest truths always find a seam to slip through. One afternoon, while folding laundry, I heard Becky speaking sharply in the laundry room, her voice low but venomous. "We just need $350,000. The house is worth double. If it was in our name, we'd have the loan already." "No, she isn't mentally stable. She's old, slow, forgetful. We just have to get her out." I froze behind the door, the laundry basket sagging in my arms. I should have confronted her. Instead, I stood still and listened. That night, when Andrew came home, they sat at the kitchen table, talking in voices they assumed could not reach the stairs. I sat on the second step, holding my breath, listening to the son I raised plan my removal. Andrew said, "The lawyer said it's easier if she's declared mentally incompetent. Then we can get guardianship and handle everything: the house, the bank, the loan." Becky responded immediately. "She's confused half the time anyway. If we show the court how she repeats herself and forgets things, it'll be easy." Andrew hesitated. "It still feels wrong," Becky scoffed. "Do you want a better life? Or do you want to rot here because your mother can't let go of her moldy house? That cabin is our future. Waiting for her to die could take 10 years. She's stubborn. She'll last forever." My breath shook. But they weren't finished. Andrew whispered, "So, what do we actually do?" Becky leaned back in her chair, victorious already. "Simple. Make her sign whatever I put in front of her. And if she refuses, we dump her in a cheap nursing facility. Old people panic when they're alone. She'll break." I felt something in me tear. Not my heart, not my pride, but the last thread tying me to the idea that Andrew still loved me. I went to my room, closed the door quietly, as though even my grief needed to stay polite. I lay in the dark, listening to their laughter below glasses clinking, Becky praising Andrew for finally being a man, and Andrew laughing like hurting me was some kind of victory. Every sound was a knife laid gently into my chest. But even in that darkness, a memory flickered, small, steady, persistent. The safe. The old steel safe my husband kept behind a false wooden panel in his workshop. The safe he had showed me the combination to the night before he died. For when you need to protect yourself, he had said, his hand trembling over mine. I had not opened it in years. But Becky had never asked about it. Andrew had forgotten it existed, and both of them had overlooked something far more dangerous than the safe itself, the past. They thought age had softened my memory. They thought fear would break my resolve. They thought humiliation would silence me. They believed I was too old, too fragile, too desperate for love to fight back. But they had no idea what that safe held or what it would mean for them. That night, while the house was quiet and their cruel Christmas laughter faded into distant echoes, something inside me shifted. Not anger, not revenge. Something older and steadier. Certainty. I would not confront them yet. I would not scream. I would not plead. I would not give them the satisfaction of knowing I had heard every word. I would let them believe I was weak. I would let them believe I was breaking. I would let them believe they had already won. Because the moment I remembered the safe, the power shifted. They thought they were preparing to take everything from me, but what they were really doing was walking straight into the consequences they had built with their own hands. They wanted my house. They wanted my silence. They wanted my surrender. They would get none of it. Only the truth delivered in a way they would never forget. I walked back into the living room, carrying a tray of warm bread rolls, pretending I hadn't heard a single word of the conversation from the night before the plan to declare me incompetent, to take my home, to tuck me away in a cheap nursing facility like an unwanted winter coat. Pretending was the last kindness I would ever give them, though they didn't know it yet. Becky watched me all evening. Her eyes followed every movement, my hands, my steps, my expression, as if she were waiting for any sign I had discovered what she and Andrew were plotting. I gave her nothing. And the fact I remained calm seemed to irritate her more than anything I could have said. It started with small cuts. She gathered everyone for a family photo, but she kept repositioning me. Move left, no back. Actually, Marjorie, stand by the wall. Too much shadow on your face. It ruins the picture. I ended up outside the frame, watching a family I no longer belonged to smile for a camera in my own house. When I brought out the roasted vegetables I had cooked since Andrew was little, Becky swooped in with a dazzling smile. No need for that. I made a better version. Let's serve something people will actually eat. She slid my dish into the sink like it was spoiled food. Guests forced polite laughter, but their amusement stung more than Becky's cruelty. Later, as I handed out sparkling cider, Becky announced loudly, "Careful, everyone. Her hands shake. Wouldn't want any spills." Another ripple of quiet laughter spread, not malicious, just cowardly. And Andrew? He looked at his shoes. I knew then. Becky didn't just want my house. She wanted the audience to see me as useless before she took it. Then she made her move. Becky clapped sharply. "Everyone, can I have your attention? I need to say something important." The room grew still. Andrew stiffened beside her, sensing something ugly was coming. Becky stepped forward with a sweet, poisonous smile. "Since we're all here, I think it's time we talk about the challenge Andrew and I have been dealing with." A soft murmur passed through the crowd. She pointed at me. "This," she said loudly, "is our second child." People gasped. Someone set down their glass too fast. "Yes, you heard me," Becky continued. "I spend more time managing her confusion and messes than I do running my own home. And frankly, I'm exhausted." She pulled a folded paper from her pocket, an old medical form from last year, where my doctor had simply written that I was dealing with stress after my husband's passing. She had circled the words "stress-related symptoms" in red ink and scribbled the phrase "possible cognitive decline" in the margin to make it look official. Those words were never written by my doctor. They were Becky's invention, her handwriting, her weapon. She had circled the words "stress-related symptoms" in red ink and scribbled "possible cognitive decline" in the margin to make it look official. Those markings were not my doctor's handwriting. They were hers, her invention, her weapon. Becky held it up like a court exhibit. If anyone's wondering why she forgets things or repeats herself, here's your answer. It's all documented. She hid every line that said I was healthy. She highlighted only what she could twist. I watched people lean in, whispering, unsure of what to believe. The doubt stung. I had spent years earning respect in this community, yet Becky unraveled it with one lie and one sheet of paper. Then she stepped closer, close enough that the peppermint on her breath touched my cheek. She whispered loud enough for the front row to hear. Let's be honest. Andrew turned out fine because of me, not you. I'm the backbone of this family. You're just leftover. Andrew stayed silent. Silence is its own confession. I looked at Becky for a long moment, long enough for her smirk to waver just slightly. She expected me to cry, argue, and collapse. She needed drama, something she could later spin as evidence of instability. Instead, I gave her nothing. I understand, Becky, I said. My voice was calm, steady, in a way that startled her. Her eyebrows twitched, just a flicker, because there was no fear in my tone, no defeat. The room held its breath. She had wanted to humiliate me. Instead, she revealed herself. And something quiet and powerful shifted inside me. The humiliation she intended to break me became the moment I stopped pretending to be weak. I walked away without crying, without trembling, without offering her another word. Becky believed she had just won. But as I stepped down the hallway toward my room, my fingers brushed against the small key hidden in my pocket, the key to the safe my husband left behind. And for the first time that night, I realized something Becky would soon learn. She hadn't defeated me. She had awakened me. The real fight had just begun. After the guests left, and the house finally fell silent except for the faint ticking of the old mantel clock, I went to my bedroom, closed the door, and locked it. My hands were steady, not with calm, but with clarity. Becky thought she had broken me. She thought I was rattled, humiliated, defeated. She had no idea she had just given me the final push I needed. I reached into the back of my closet and slid aside a heavy wooden box that nobody had touched since my husband died. Beneath it was a small metal key wrapped in a handkerchief. The air in my lungs felt tight as I walked quietly down the hall toward my late husband's workshop. The wooden floor creaked beneath my slippers, but not loudly enough to wake anyone. Becky and Andrew were still upstairs, talking softly, their voices muffled, but I didn't need to listen. I already knew exactly who they were. The workshop smelled like sawdust and winter air. My husband had built furniture here until the day his heart gave out. I placed the key beside the workbench and slid my fingers beneath the false panel he had built into the wall. The wood lifted with a gentle thump. Behind it sat the old steel safe gray, scratched, stubborn, and loyal. Much like me, I supposed. I turned the dial with slow, practiced movements, left twice, right once. The familiar click echoed like a quiet truth returning to life. When the door opened, dust lifted into the air like a sigh. Inside the safe were folders, envelopes, copies of documents I had kept hidden for 20 years. Proof of everything Becky pretended never happened. Proof of everything Andrew never cared to learn. Proof of every wound I had swallowed in silence. The first document was the store incident report the day Becky stole my credit card to buy designer boots she couldn't afford. She had been 20 then, wild and impulsive, trying to impress friends who never cared about her. The store manager had called the police. They were ready to file charges. That report said clearly, "Suspect used card belonging to Marjorie Miller. My name, my card, my problem to clean up." Underneath it was the form Becky signed, agreeing not to contest the accusations if I asked the store not to press charges. I had stood in that office, begging them to spare her, knowing what a criminal record would do to her future and Andrew's. The next file held bank statements, proof that I had paid Becky's debt. Over $5,000 to cover the credit card she claimed she didn't open. Another $3,000 to stop her car from being repossessed. $2,000 more to cover medical bills she refused to tell Andrew about. Layer after layer of quiet sacrifices, all the things she now twisted into claims that I interfered in their life. Under that stack was the printed email that had made my hands shake the night I found it years ago. Becky had mistakenly used my old printer, not realizing it saved every document scanned or printed. The message was to her best friend, the one she used to gossip with about how tragic I looked in my sweaters. The email read, "That house will be mine when the old lady dies. Andrew won't fight me. He never fights me." She had written that 6 months after we moved in together, when I was still cooking her meals and hemming her work pants. Next, I pulled out the envelope containing the deed to my home. Becky always assumed it was my husband's house, passed down to me after his death. She mocked the old floors, the paint, the decor, never once imagining the truth. The truth was written right there, in black ink. The house was purchased 5 years after his death, not by him, by me. And it was bought with the same savings I had spent years rebuilding after paying off Becky's debts. She didn't know. Andrew didn't know. Nobody knew. The house Becky demanded I hand over, because it wasn't mine to begin with, existed because I saved her from prison and bankruptcy. I sat there for a moment. The papers spread before me like the ghosts of every sacrifice I had made. Not out of pride, not out of anger, but because the weight of it all finally felt real, not just a memory, not just a silent ache I carried alone, but something I could hold in my hands. For 20 years, I let Becky believe I was weak. For 20 years, I let Andrew think I was fragile. For 20 years, I allowed them to build a story about me that was convenient for their selfishness. And now, for the first time, I understood something important. Their arrogance wasn't a weapon. It was an opening. Becky believed she could manipulate the court by making me look unstable. Andrew believed silence would shield him from guilt. They both believed the house was my husband's, and therefore morally theirs. They believed so many things, and I would let them keep believing them just a little longer. Because while they prepared forged narratives to take my home, I had the real history, the real documents, the real proof of every lie, every theft, every betrayal, every dollar I paid, every line Becky signed, every word she tried to bury. The truth wasn't just on my side. It was cataloged, stamped, signed, time-stamped, irrefutable. I gathered the papers, slid them into a clean folder, and tucked it under my arm. As I closed the safe, I heard footsteps upstairs, Becky pacing, Andrew answering her in tired, frustrated sighs. They were still arguing about how to handle me. I smiled. For the first time in years, I smiled. They had no idea the ground they were standing on was about to crumble beneath them. Not because I would fight, but because I would let them charge forward straight into the truth they had spent so long rewriting. Their confidence was my weapon. Their entitlement was my shield. And the house? They were about to learn whose house it really was. I did not sleep much that night, but not because of fear. I stayed awake out of purpose, out of preparation, out of a kind of calm I had not felt in years. By sunrise, the folder of documents sat neatly on my kitchen table, beside 3 mugs and a pot of coffee that had more strength than the 2 people I invited. I texted Andrew and Becky at 7 a.m. The message short: "Come downstairs. We need to talk before the day continues." Becky stomped down the stairs first, irritated, hair unbrushed, still wrapped in her expensive robe. Andrew trailed behind her, eyes tired from a night of arguing they had not slept well, and that was clear. But the real surprise waited for them at the dining table. My attorney. He sat with a leather notebook open and a calm expression Becky mistook for weakness. She stopped cold. "What the hell is this?" Andrew blinked, confused. "Mom? Why is there a lawyer in our house?" I gestured toward the chairs. "Sit, both of you." Becky scoffed. "We're not doing this. You're not ruining our Christmas morning with your whatever this is." I stayed perfectly still. "You already ruined it. I'm simply finishing what you started." My lawyer folded his hands. "This meeting is recorded for legal clarity." Becky exploded. "Legal? Legal for what?" I opened the folder. The air changed. One by one, I placed the documents between us, like cards in a game neither of them knew we were playing. "Becky," I said softly, Why don't you read the first one? She snatched the paper and froze the moment she recognized the store logo, the incident report documenting her credit card theft 20 years ago. Her face drained of color. What? Where did you? This isn't. Next, I slid forward the agreement she had signed to avoid prosecution. Andrew's head snapped toward her. Becky, what is this? She stammered. It's ancient history. It's not important. Then came the bank statements. The debts, the payments. Every dollar I covered for her. Every lie, she told Andrew. You said those bills weren't yours, he whispered, voice cracking. You said my mom was meddling. Becky slammed her fists on the table. She is meddling. She kept all this to use against me. I moved on to the next item. The printed email Becky sent her friend. The one declaring the house would be hers when the old lady dies. Andrew inhaled sharply. You said you never said anything like this. Becky shouted. She forged it. She printed. She made it up. My attorney spoke for the first time. The metadata confirms the file was sent from your email, Mrs. Brooks. Becky looked around the room like a trapped animal. I wasn't finished. I placed the deed in front of them. The silence was suffocating. Andrew's voice came out hollow. This house wasn't Dad's? No, I said. I bought it. 5 years after he passed. With what was left after paying Becky's debts. He sat back slowly, absorbing it. His world shifting, his loyalties cracking. And that's when I delivered the final blow for him. Andrew, I said, there's something you should read too. I handed him a printed screenshot, his own text messages, sent months ago to his coworker, messages he never expected to surface. Messages that read, Becky only married me for money. She's selfish, always wants more. If she could take my mother's house today, she would. Becky shot out of her chair like fire had touched her. You bastard! How could you? How dare you? She lunged across the table, nails out, striking Andrew's face so hard the attorney stood up abruptly. Andrew shielded himself with both hands as Becky screamed, I should have left you years ago. You're useless, pathetic, you let her control everything. Andrew yelled back, I let her. You made me do this. You pushed me into this. The chaos I had held inside for years finally unfolded exactly the way truth always does, loud, ugly, undeniable. And then came the knock. 3 sharp, authoritative bangs. My attorney opened the door. 2 APS investigators stepped inside, badges visible. Becky's shriek turned into a strangled choke. Why are they here? What now? The lead investigator addressed me respectfully. Mrs. Miller, we received the video you submitted last night. Becky spun toward me. Video? What video? I met her eyes calmly. The one where you publicly humiliated me in front of our guests last night. Her jaw dropped. APS continued reading from their tablet. Based on the footage, we are opening an investigation into elder emotional abuse, financial exploitation, and coercion. Andrew collapsed into his chair. Becky backed away as though the floor had turned molten beneath her. You can't do this. It was a joke, just a Christmas joke. The investigator looked at her coldly. Ma'am, nothing about what you did was a joke. My attorney added. The court will be informed this week. Becky shook her head violently. She's lying. She planned this. I finally stood. Becky, I said, with a quiet that overpowered her screams. I didn't plan your actions. You did. I simply gave the truth the room it needed. She stumbled backward as APS asked her and Andrew to remain available for further questioning. Andrew buried his face in his hands. Becky kept whispering, This can't be happening. This can't be happening. But it was. And the moment I closed the folder, Becky understood something she had never considered. She hadn't been fighting a fragile old woman. She had been fighting a mother who had been holding the truth like a loaded weapon she never wanted to use. And now that it was released, there was no stopping the collapse. The morning after the confrontation felt strangely peaceful, as if the house itself had finally exhaled. Snow had settled across the porch overnight, soft and undisturbed, a quiet contrast to the chaos that had torn through the rooms just hours before. I sat at the dining table, pen in hand, my attorney beside me, and signed my new will with fingers that did not tremble once. "Mrs. Miller," he said gently, "this makes it official. Andrew inherits nothing. Becky is restricted from contact. The house will legally transfer to the Women's Protection Trust upon your passing or earlier, if you choose." I nodded. "Earlier," I whispered. "Today." He blinked. "Are you certain?" I looked around the home where I had cooked every Christmas dinner, where I had sewn curtains, where I had mourned my husband, and where I had been humiliated by the very people I sheltered. "Yes," I said, "this house no longer belongs to Payne." He filed the final document. It was done. Minutes later, we stood in the living room with Becky and Andrew facing us like defendants awaiting verdicts. Becky's face was streaked with mascara, eyes swollen from crying and screaming through the night. Andrew looked hollow, aged by a truth he had avoided for years. My attorney read the terms aloud. Becky's knees buckled the moment he reached the clause requiring her to vacate within 72 hours. She gasped, gripping the air as if she might stop the words themselves. 72 hours? You can't do that. It's Christmas. You can't kick us out at Christmas." I held her gaze, steady as the snow outside. "You made me leave Christmas first, Becky. All I am doing now is returning the same choice." She dropped to the floor right there on the cold hardwood, the sound echoing like a crack in the silence. "Please," she sobbed. "I have nowhere to go. You can't do this to me. I was angry. I was stupid. Just take it back. Please, please, I'm begging you." Her desperation might have once moved me, but cruelty repeated becomes choice, not impulse, and I had watched her choose it too many times. "You wanted me gone," I said softly. "Now you get what you wished for." Outside, snowflakes drifted past the window, bright in the morning sun. Inside, Becky pressed her forehead to the floor, crying so loudly the Christmas ornaments on the tree trembled. My attorney finished reading the paperwork and stepped aside. For the first time in years, I felt taller. Andrew finally stepped toward me, breaking down completely. His shoulders shook as he grabbed my hands, his voice cracking with every word. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please don't leave me with nothing. I can fix this. I can make it right. Just give me a chance." His tears hit my knuckles like warm, desperate drops of grief. "Mom, please. I can change." I wished that his apology had come before cruelty had become a habit, before silence became betrayal, before he let someone else's lies shape the way he saw me. I squeezed his hands once, then gently pulled mine away. "I forgive you," I said, his breath hitched with hope. "But forgiveness," I continued, "is not an invitation to return to the place where the hurt was made. I am not going back." His face collapsed as if the bones beneath it shattered. "No, Mom, don't say that. Don't leave me. Don't walk away." "I already did," I whispered. "Last night, when the truth finally came out." He fell to his knees beside Becky, though they didn't touch. Two people who had stood proudly above me for years, suddenly unable to stand at all. I reached for my coat, my red wool one, the same I wore every Christmas. I opened the door, the cold air sweeping in to meet me like an old friend. Snowflakes landed on my hair, my cheeks, my hands. I stepped outside, letting the door fall closed behind me, as softly as a final blessing. The Christmas lights glowed across the front porch, warm against the pale morning. I walked down the steps without looking back. For the first time in decades, the world felt wide again. And the freedom was louder than any apology Andrew would ever make, and any scream Becky would ever cry into the snow. I moved into my new apartment on a quiet Wednesday morning, long after the papers were signed and the snow outside my old house had been trampled by arguments and regret. The building wasn't luxurious. The hallways echoed a bit, the floorboards creaked, and the radiators hissed at night. But it was mine, every inch of it. And for the first time in 4 decades, I had a space where no one raised their voice at me, no one demanded anything from me, and no one treated me like a burden dressed in warm sweaters. The manager handed me the keys with a smile. "If you need help setting up your Christmas tree, just let us know," he said. I thanked him, though he didn't know I had already bought a tiny artificial tree 2 feet tall, with little gold ribbons and soft white lights, because I wanted something small enough to hold but bright enough to remind me that hope comes in gentle sizes too. I set it on the small wooden table by the window. I decorated it slowly, hanging each ornament as though I were stitching together a new life. No chaos, no shouting, no hands snatching things away from me. Just quiet, just breath, just me. The first night there, I sat on my new couch, sipped hot tea, and listened to the hum of the radiator. I realized I had forgotten what peace sounded like. It was not silence. Silence has sharp edges. Peace, though, peace settles like a blanket across your shoulders. Within days, I met neighbors, other seniors who carried their own invisible bags of heartbreak. A widow who lost her dog last spring. A retired school teacher whose children lived 3 states away but rarely visited. A man who used to be a carpenter and still carved small wooden angels to pass the time. They welcomed me gently, without asking for anything. We shared coffee in the community room. We played cards on Thursday nights. In their company, I felt something I had not felt in years. Belonging. And somehow, that was when the first package arrived. A red box tied with a gold ribbon, sitting quietly at my door like a confession too afraid to knock. No name on it. But the handwriting on the small card was familiar, thick strokes, a slight slant. Andrew's. Inside were homemade cookies. My favorite kind. The ones I taught him to make when he was little and burned his fingers trying to steal them from the oven. I closed the box gently and carried it downstairs. Mrs. Henderson, the neighbor across the hall, had a granddaughter visiting that day. I handed the cookies to her. "These were sent to the wrong door," I said softly. "Your little one might enjoy them." More packages came in the following days. Thermal socks, a jar of honey, a wool scarf, even a small nativity set. I recognized Andrew's handwriting on every tag. I regifted every single one. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but because healing sometimes means not reopening the wounds someone else is desperately trying to bandage too late. One afternoon, as I walked home from the grocery store, I saw a figure standing outside the gated entrance to the senior apartments, wrapped in a long coat, hair messy, hands shoved into pockets. Andrew. He didn't see me at first. He was staring at the building like a child staring into a candy shop he wasn't allowed to enter. There was a sag in his shoulders I had never seen before, a weight he couldn't shrug off. Part of me ached. Another part stood firm. I turned and took the long way around the building, entering through the back gate. Sometimes motherhood means holding on. Sometimes it means letting go so completely that even your shadow refuses to follow. A week later, the security guard told me Becky had been by as well. She asked if she could come inside, he said. We told her no, unless she was on someone's visitor list. She's not, I replied. I imagined her standing there in the cold, makeup running, begging for a version of forgiveness that would undo consequences. Life does not hand out those kinds of forgiveness, not even at Christmas. She came 2 more times. Andrew came almost every day. Neither of them crossed my threshold. On the last Friday before Christmas, our community held a small gathering in the common room. There were paper snowflakes on the walls, plastic garland around the windows, and a table of potluck dishes brought by shaky hands and generous hearts. Someone asked me if I would like to say a few words, since I was the newest resident. I stood slowly, leaning on the back of my chair. Everyone watched, soft and patient. You know, I said, I spent a long time thinking I had lost my family. Several people nodded knowingly, the kind of nod that belongs to people who have buried their hopes a few times too many. But I realized something, I continued. You cannot lose what you never truly had. A hush fell over the room. I did not lose a son or a daughter-in-law, I said. I lost the illusion that they ever saw me as family. And losing an illusion is not grief, it is clarity. The widow near the window dabbed her eyes. And this Christmas, I said, looking around at the gentle faces, I found something I hadn't had for a very long time. What's that? Someone asked softly. Me, I answered. I found myself. A warm ripple of quiet approval moved through the room, not applause, just understanding. Later that night, as I sat beside my tiny Christmas tree, watching its soft, golden lights reflect off the window, I whispered to myself, "This is my first free Christmas in 40 years." And for the first time, the words didn't hurt. They shone. The strange thing about starting over at my age is that people expect your world to shrink, but mine kept quietly expanding. Not in dramatic ways, but in small circles, little ripples of life I had forgotten were possible. After Christmas passed and the New Year's lights in town dimmed, my days took on a rhythm that felt almost tender. Each morning I woke before sunrise, not because someone slammed a cabinet door or stomped down the stairs, but because my body finally remembered what peace felt like. I would sit by the window with a cup of tea, watching frost melt slowly along the glass, and it felt like watching myself thaw after decades of winter. I began joining a walking group, just 4 of us, all over 60, bundled up in scarves and determination. We walked laps around the courtyard, telling stories that had been kept quiet for years. One woman, Eleanor, confided that her children only visited when they needed something notarized. Another man admitted he had lived 20 minutes from his daughter for 17 years and still hadn't been invited to her house. Somehow, sharing our bruises made them lighter. But the truth is, healing does not happen in a straight line. A month after I moved in, I received the first letter. The envelope was thin, wrinkled a little from being carried around too long. The handwriting was unfamiliar, not Andrew's, not Becky's. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Mrs. Miller, I witnessed the incident at your Christmas gathering. If you ever need a statement, I am willing to provide one. You deserved better." A neighbor. No name. Just a quiet truth from someone who had stayed silent that night. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a small wooden box where I kept only things worth remembering. Not proof, not evidence, just kindness. A week later came something different. A phone call. When the receptionist told me Andrew had left a message for me at the front desk, my spine stiffened the way it does when you touch something hot by accident. I didn't call back, but I carried the slip of paper in my pocket all afternoon, not because I planned to respond, because part of me, the part that raised him, needed a moment to grieve the version of him I once believed in. Healing often means grieving what never was. Spring arrived slowly. The snow retreated. The courtyard filled with early tulips planted by a group of volunteers. I found myself helping more than I expected, kneeling on the soft soil, pruning, watering, shaping something new out of what winter had left behind. I was tending to myself without realizing it. Then, one mild afternoon, as I was sweeping my balcony, I heard a familiar voice below. "Mom?" My breath caught. Andrew stood at the entrance of the building again, but not the way he had before. He wasn't looking at the walls like they were barriers, he was looking up, searching for me with a kind of quiet desperation. He hadn't seen me yet. He held a manila folder under his arm. His hair was uncombed, his coat hung loosely, as if he had lost weight he couldn't afford to lose. For a moment, just a moment, my heart softened. Then he spoke again. "Mom, I just want a chance to explain." The old instinct to comfort him, guide him, reach for him rose up like a muscle memory. But then I remembered Christmas Eve, the shove, the silence, the way he let Becky spit venom into my face without lifting a finger, the way he planned to lock me away. Instinct is powerful. Memory is stronger. I stepped back slowly, out of view, not out of cruelty, out of self-respect. He stayed outside for nearly 20 minutes. I watched from behind the curtain as he paced, checked his phone, rubbed his hands together in nervous circles. Then he lowered his head and walked away. And I let him go. That night, I didn't cry. That was how I knew I was healing. By summer, I became something of a leader in the apartment community, a role I never asked for but somehow fit into. I organized a small book exchange, helped the widower next door bake muffins without burning his eyebrows off, and taught 2 ladies how to crochet ornaments for next Christmas. Not one person in that building saw me as a burden. Not one person rolled their eyes when I walked into a room. Not one person raised their voice. It was a different universe, one I should have entered decades ago. The real turning point came during our 4th of July barbecue. The sun was warm, kids visiting their grandparents were running around with sparklers, and the air smelled of grilled corn and sunscreen. One of the volunteers approached me, Sarah, a young woman with bright red hair and an even brighter heart. "Mrs. Miller," she said, "we're opening a new transitional home for women next spring. Your old house will be the main property. We're naming the program after your husband since the deed listed his surname. But I wanted to ask if you'd like a plaque in your name inside. Something small, something that acknowledges what you did." I looked at her, stunned. "You mean something people will see?" She smiled. "Something survivors will see. Something that says the house was built by a woman who refused to be broken." A warmth spread through me, one I hadn't felt since my 30s. "Yes," I said quietly. "That would mean a great deal." And in that moment, I understood something profound. I hadn't just escaped a toxic life, I had built a new foundation for others escaping their own. As the sun set that evening, I sat outside with a soft blanket across my lap, watching distant fireworks bloom like red and gold flowers in the sky. Children laughed, seniors clapped, someone sang off key, and I whispered, not to myself this time, but to the life ahead. I survived my longest winter. Now I'm ready for the spring. And I meant every word. If you stayed with me until the end, thank you. Stories like mine are carried in the bones, not the mouth, and it takes a brave heart to listen. I spent years believing silence was love, believing endurance was duty. But this Christmas, I finally learned the truth. Freedom can come late, but it still comes. If my story touched you, if it made you feel, remember, or understand, then stay close. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories. Not for me. For every grandmother still fighting to be heard, still waiting for someone to see her worth. Your support keeps these stories alive, keeps our voices from fading. Come back for the next truth I have to share. And remember, wisdom doesn't shout, it remembers.